It starts with a text message you don't answer. Not because you didn't see it, not because you don't care, but because the moment you read it, something in your chest tightens. A friend asking how you are, a family member suggesting dinner, someone reaching out with genuine warmth. And your first feeling isn't gratitude, it's exhaustion. You stare at the message. You craft 3 different responses in your head. You imagine the conversation that will follow, the questions, the explanations, the performance of being present. And quietly, without drama, you close the app. You tell yourself you'll respond later. You tell yourself you're just tired. You tell yourself it's nothing personal. But deep down, you know the truth. Being alone doesn't just feel easier, it feels like relief. Like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath all day. Like taking off shoes that were too tight. Like closing a door and hearing the click of the lock and feeling your entire nervous system exhale. And here's the part that makes you feel broken. You don't just prefer solitude. You need it, you crave it, you protect it like it's the only safe place left in the world. Because, for you, it is. Other people talk about loneliness like it's this terrible, tragic thing. They talk about human connection like it's oxygen. They say things like, we're wired for connection, and no man is an island. And you nod along because you're supposed to. But inside, you're thinking, what if the island is the only place I don't have to pretend? What if solitude isn't loneliness at all, but the first honest breath you've taken all week? Here's the paradox no one prepared you for. The thing that makes you feel safe is the same thing that's slowly making you unreachable. The walls you built to protect yourself have become so high, so thick, so impenetrable that now even you can't remember what you were protecting. You didn't choose to be this way. You didn't wake up one day and decide that isolation was your aesthetic. You adapted. Somewhere in your past, maybe when you were 7, maybe when you were 17, you learned a brutal lesson. Needing people is dangerous. And so, you stopped needing them. You stopped reaching. You stopped asking. You became so self-sufficient, so hyper-independent, so utterly capable of handling everything alone that people started calling it strength. But it wasn't strength, it was survival intelligence. And now, years later, that same intelligence is the thing keeping you trapped behind glass, watching life happen, but never quite touching it. Let's name what's happening here. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment with hyper-independent coping. It's a term that sounds clinical, but what it describes is devastatingly human. Avoidant attachment develops when a child learns that their emotional needs will not be consistently met. Not necessarily because of abuse or neglect in the traditional sense, but because the adults around them were unpredictable, dismissive, or simply unavailable. So the child adapts. They stop crying out. They stop seeking comfort. They learn to self-soothe, to self-regulate, to become their own source of safety. And the brain, brilliant, ruthless, survival-oriented, rewires itself accordingly. Neuroscientists have found that people with avoidant attachment patterns show reduced activity in the brain's social engagement system, the circuits responsible for bonding, trust, and emotional reciprocity. At the same time, they show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex during moments of relational stress. Translation: your brain learned to think its way out of emotional situations instead of feeling through them. It learned that logic is safer than longing, that independence is safer than intimacy, that solitude is safer than the risk of being seen and then abandoned. Think of it like this. Imagine your nervous system as a house. In a securely attached person, the doors are unlocked. People can come and go. There's warmth, light, windows open to the world. But in you, the house is a fortress. The doors are bolted, the windows are shuttered. There's a moat, maybe even a drawbridge, and you live inside, alone, convincing yourself that this is freedom. But here's what no one tells you. Fortresses aren't built for living, they're built for surviving. And you've been surviving so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to live. This survival strategy also activates what psychologists call the default mode network, the part of your brain that's constantly scanning for threats, replaying past interactions, predicting future rejection. It's the voice that whispers, "If I don't need them, they can't hurt me. If I don't ask, I can't be disappointed. If I stay small, I stay safe." And for years, maybe decades, this worked. You became the friend people could rely on but never worry about. The child who didn't need much, the partner who was low maintenance, the colleague who handled everything alone. People admired your independence. They called you strong, self-reliant, unbothered. What they didn't see was the price you were paying. Because every time you chose solitude over connection, you reinforced the belief that you are too much to need and not enough to be chosen. And that belief, that's the invisible chain. Here's the cost no one tells you about. It's not dramatic, it's not a breakdown, it's not even something you can point to and say, "This is where it hurts." It's quieter than that. It's the slow, creeping realization that you've become a ghost in your own life. You're there, but you're not there. You show up, but you don't arrive. You're in the room, but you're 1,000 miles away, watching yourself perform the role of a person who's okay. You've gotten so good at being alone that you've forgotten how to be with someone. Not physically, you can sit next to people, you can laugh at their jokes, you can nod at the right moments, but emotionally, you're unreachable. And the worst part is, you've convinced yourself this is fine. You've romanticized your isolation. You've turned it into an identity. I'm just introverted. I'm just independent. I just need a lot of space. But underneath those words is a grief you refuse to name. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And that's it, isn't it? You're not lonely because you're alone. You're lonely because even when you're surrounded by people, you can't let them in. You've built an internal world so private, so protected, so heavily guarded that no one gets to see the real you. And the tragedy is this: you don't even know if the real you still exists. Because you've been performing for so long, performing strength, performing independence, performing fine, that you've lost touch with the part of you that's soft, that's scared, that just wants to be held without having to ask. Philosophers call this existential loneliness, the kind that isn't solved by company, but by authenticity. And authenticity requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is the one thing your nervous system has been trained to avoid. So, you stay behind the glass, safe, controlled, alone. And every day, the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be gets a little wider. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize, I don't know how to be myself around other people anymore. This is the invisible grief. The grief of living a life where rest only comes in isolation, where honesty only happens in your own head, where love is something you give but never receive, because receiving means owing, and owing means trapped. You grieve the version of yourself who could have asked for help without feeling weak. You grieve the relationships you sabotaged before they could sabotage you. You grieve the life you could have lived if you hadn't been so afraid of needing anyone. And the cruelest part? You grieve alone. Because admitting this grief would mean admitting you're not as okay as you claim. And you've spent your entire life making sure no one ever has to worry about you. So, what does this look like in your adult life? Let me show you. You become someone who cancels plans at the last minute and feels relieved, not guilty. Not because you don't like the person, but because the idea of being perceived, of maintaining conversation, of managing someone else's emotional needs while hiding your own, it's just too much. So you send the text, you apologize, you reschedule, and then you sit alone in your apartment and feel peaceful. You become someone who can't accept help, even when you're drowning. A friend offers to help you move. A colleague offers to split the workload. A partner offers to listen. And your immediate response is, no, I've got it. Not because you actually have it, but because accepting help feels like admitting weakness, like creating debt, like giving someone power over you. So you handle it alone. You always handle it alone, even when it breaks you. You become someone who feels numb during moments that are supposed to be joyful. A birthday party, a celebration, a gathering of people who care about you. And you're there, smiling, participating, but inside, nothing. Not sadness, not anxiety, just absence. Because joy requires presence, and presence requires letting your guard down. And letting your guard down feels like standing naked in a room of strangers. You become someone who overthinks every text, every interaction, every request. Someone asks, "Want to hang out?" And instead of just saying yes or no, you spiral. Do they actually want to see me, or are they just being polite? If I say yes, will they expect me to be fun? If I say no, will they stop asking? So you don't respond. You leave it on read. You wait until the right response comes to you. And by then, it's too late. You become someone who fantasizes about being seen, but panics when someone actually sees you. Deep down, there's a part of you that wants someone to notice, to ask the right question, to see through the mask and say, "You're not okay, are you?" But when someone does, when someone gets close enough to see the cracks, you pull away, you deflect, you make a joke, you change the subject, because being truly seen means being truly known, and being truly known means they might leave, and you'd rather leave first. You become someone who romanticizes solitude to avoid admitting you're afraid. You tell yourself you're a lone wolf. You post quotes about independence. You convince yourself that not needing anyone is a superpower. But late at night, when the distractions fade, you feel it. The ache. The quiet, persistent ache of living behind walls you can no longer climb. Here's what you need to understand. These aren't personality traits. These are coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms are brilliant until they're not, until they become the very thing suffocating you. The first step towards healing isn't fixing yourself, it's witnessing yourself. It's looking at these patterns without judgment and saying, this made sense, this kept me safe, this was intelligent, but I don't need it anymore. Because the child who built these walls did an incredible job. They kept you alive, but you're not that child anymore, and you don't have to live in survival mode forever. So, how do you unlearn this? How do you dismantle a fortress you've lived in your entire life? The truth is, you don't tear it down all at once. You start with a single brick. You start by recognizing that needing people doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. You start by practicing what therapists call micro-vulnerability. Not collapsing, not falling apart, not oversharing, just one honest sentence. I'm actually really tired. I've been struggling with this. I could use some help. You don't have to trust everyone. Just one safe person. Just one true thing. One thing you've been carrying alone. This is where inner child reparenting begins. You imagine the younger version of you, the one who learned to be alone, and instead of abandoning them, you go back, you sit with them, you hold their hand, and you tell them, it's okay to need people. It's okay to rest. It's okay to be held. This is shadow work in its purest form, integrating the parts of yourself you've exiled because they felt too vulnerable, too needy, too much. Carl Jung said it best. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not the fortress, it's the person inside the fortress, the one who's been waiting, quietly, patiently, for permission to come out. Here's what healing looks like. It's choosing softness even when it feels dangerous. It's saying, I need you, even when your throat closes around the words. It's letting someone show up for you and staying present instead of running. It's realizing that connection isn't a threat, it's a bridge. And you've been standing on one side of that bridge your entire life, convinced that crossing it will destroy you. But the truth is, staying on this side is what's destroying you. Because isolation isn't peace, it's just controlled suffering. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve to be known, to be held, to be loved, not despite your needs, but because you're human enough to have them. So, here's my invitation. Stop performing strength. Start practicing honesty. Stop hiding your needs. Start trusting that the right people won't use them against you. And if they do, if someone proves your worst fears right, you'll survive that too. Because you've survived everything else. But this time, you won't have to survive alone. Being alone will always feel relief, but one day, so will being seen. One day, you'll meet someone or reconnect with someone, and you'll feel safe enough to let them in. And it won't feel like losing yourself. It will feel like finding yourself. Because the version of you that exists in solitude, that's not the whole you. That's the protected you. And protection is important, but so is connection. So is softness. So is being held. You're not broken. You're not damaged. You're not beyond repair. You're just someone who learned to survive alone. And now You're learning to live together. And that's the bravest thing you'll ever do. If this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe because you're not alone in this. You're becoming whole.